Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring on this teller to debut. She's a multi-talented performing and teaching artist. She's a poet who even specializes in the work of Paul Lawrence Dunbar. She's been as close as her home in Philadelphia to as far as Zimbabwe, Africa. It is a warm, warm invitation that I send out to this talented teller, Oni Lasana. Welcome, Oni.
Thank you, Kevin. What a nice introduction. Thank you so much.
It is so great to have you here. I know that we've crossed paths in many ways, but this is great to do it in person digitally until we can share a stage together.
That would be wonderful. Yes.
I,
I've
I,
watched you for years. I've watched all your videos on YouTube about when I was first starting out in storytelling.
oh, I,
I've taken all your courses, the free ones, of course, because but you've been so generous to the storytelling community. So I really appreciate meeting you now and doing this debut with you.
Oni, we so appreciate you being on debut. And if you're trying to get into a certain course, you just let me know. And I'll ask you a question that I always begin with in some way. How has story found you, or you found story?
My earliest memory of finding story was in my living room in my playpen. I grew up in a little row house in Philadelphia. My mother was a widow with 5 children, and I was the baby. And when she had to cook or work, she put me in a playpen in the living room. And I remember being in the playpen, jumping up and down, and she would come and to a little TV, a little black and white TV. They had the front doors on the TV. They had the brown doors that open, and on top of that old brown TV, black and white TV, there was a little record player. Now the record player was for my sisters because they were all, playing 45s and dancing to the latest music. And my mother used to bring these little red records out, and she would play these little 45s on top of that record player for me. And I would be jumping and dancing and shaking my crib, and she would come and play. And the story that she played was called Kitty Conga. So we're talking old head. We're talking 1950s. Okay. So she would play this Kitty Conga music for me. This storyteller came on, and she told the story of Kitty Conga. Kitty Conga, I later found out, was to teach the conga line dance
Oh,
that was popular.
wow.
Okay. And I would dance in my playpen, and I would talk, and I really learned how to even say words. And as I got older, I think I might have been about 4 years old before she really let me loose out of the playpen and let me just dance and play to this Kitty Conga. And Kitty Conga was the story of the underdog, okay? Because she walked like 1, 2, 3, kick, 1, 2, 3, kick. And everybody made fun of her in the village because she walked like 1, 2, 3, kick, 1, 2, 3, kick. Oh, she was lonely. Nobody loves me. Nobody wants me. 'Cause when I walk like 1, 2, 3, kick. 1, 2, 3, kick. Well, the band came to town. Ah, big carnival. Oh, the band came to town. Everybody wanted to go see the band at the carnival. And the whole town went. And Kitty Conga's mother said, "No, you cannot go. Because, you're so embarrassing with that funny walk." Well, everybody went. And Kitty Conga, she snuck out of her house and she went to the carnival and she stood in front of the bandstand to hear the music. And she was walking 1, 2, 3, kick, 1, 2, 3, kick, right in time with the band. Do, 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 do. And that story was in me since I was maybe 3 years old. So I'm sure when my mother finally let me loose out of the playpen, say by the time I was 4 or 5, and then she would let me go down the street and sing that song to my neighbors and tell the story to my neighbors when I was about 5. She'd sit me on the front stoop with a book, and all the people in the neighborhood thought I could read. My mother said she scrapped and scraped to get the childcraft books for us. The encyclopedia, remember?
Yeah, I have them.
Remember those books? Oh yeah, we had a whole set. And she just, scraping and scratching and saving money to pay off these books. So I would sit with the childcraft books on and really look at the pictures and tell the stories on my steps when I was 5 years old. And all the people thought that I could read. And my mother would laugh because the neighbors would say, "That little girl can read already." I would just be making up, okay, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Because I remembered my mother telling me. I wasn't reading, but I would make up the stories in the Mother Goose. So all of that.
I love it. I love it. I have an opposite kind of story where
Hmm.
I was 5 years old and my mother would read comic books to me and Spider-Man and she would make them up. And I would say, no, Green Goblin actually said words, Mom. What is those words? What are those words? And as a result, when I was in kindergarten, I was a sixth grade reader and the kindergarten teacher put me on a stool, and I was the smallest student in the entire school district, not school, and I read every day the actual words to second and third graders every day. And so you and I are story kin from the very beginning, because from our very beginnings we were immersed with telling that story, telling that picture, and it being carried on to us. So we're
I,
meant
I
to be.
I didn't see it then. I didn't notice. I didn't know it was storytelling then. Um, Also, Shirley Temple. I knew all her songs. My mother, I watched her all the time. I knew all her songs. And my mother, I had a Shirley Temple doll. I had my hair in Shirley Temple curls when Easter came around. Um, she would let me when I was about 6 years old. And I tell this story because I wrote a story. I write short stories too. And I wrote a story called Just Like Him. And the National Association of Black Storytellers published it in their newsletter when it was hard copy. And I sent it in on a whim because my storytelling really came from that that long ago in my life, and I came to realize how I became a storyteller. Okay, because in my neighborhood, if you tell stories, you're gonna get a spanking. Okay, you can't be just telling stories. Okay, you're gonna get a real spanking if you be telling stories. But because of Shirley Temple and the songs, "Good Ship," "Lollipop," and I would go down when my mother let me when I was about 6. She would stand at the front door and she'd let me walk down to Mr. and Mrs. Smith's house. And it was about one, two, three porches down. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they were a European couple, and they lived right next door to an African American couple named Mr. and Mrs. Clark. And between them, they would like coerce me to come up on their porch. So I would always go to Mr. and Mrs. Clark. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, I would always go to them first because Mrs. Clark would give me cookies. And I thought Mr. Clark was a captain of a ship because I was like 6, 7 years old. I thought he was like a sea captain. And I thought Mrs. Clark, I don't know. I don't know. I just knew she was beautiful. She had a mink around her neck with a little face of a little fox. And sometimes Mr. Clark would drive this limousine. And I knew, oh man, Well, little did I know at that age that they were actually working for a very wealthy family up on the main line in Philly. And Mrs. Clark was their maid, and Mr. Clark was their chauffeur. But when he could, if he had to, help them in the early morning, he would bring the limousine in. But I thought they were like, movie stars when I was that age. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who lived next door, the European couple, they were old. They were the same age as Mr. and Mrs. Clark, and they were friends. But anytime Mr. and Mrs. Clark wasn't there, they'd have me come and be on their porch, and they would sit in their rockers on the porch, and I would sing every nursery rhyme I knew. Oh God, the ants go marching one by one. Oh, and all of them. Yeah, the ants go marching one by one. That was my favorite. Uh, Here we go, loop de loop. Oh, on the good ship, lollipop. Then I'd make up a story and just say something from what I remembered my mother telling me. And, the Kitty Conga story, I would tell that. And so storytelling has always been in me, although I think my mother nurtured it in me because she wanted me to read. And so the reading part came in with the World Book Encyclopedia. As I got older, I read every encyclopedia from A to Z. At night, I would read it, and teach myself what was going on in the World Book Encyclopedia because we were warned. We couldn't fool around. We had to read those books because she scrimped and saved to get them for us.
I didn't realize until many years later that Story was a really great teacher. And my mother would tell stories to five children or six kids on a dilapidated old couch. And I always saw myself, even though I did read the comic books and tell, but I saw myself as the listener and that I couldn't enter that world because my mother had she still is the celebrated storyteller of our family, and I would never take that role away. But there
Right.
was a time when I said I could be a teller too. What was that for you?
Oh boy, I'm a late bloomer because, like I said, growing up, the first play I was, you said I could be a listener to, or I could be a storyteller too. Um, it wasn't long after all of that. My mother put me in a dance class at the recreation center. So we did the whole dances to all the stories, and I had to know the songs to South Pacific. I'm gonna wash that man right out of my head. I'm gonna wash that man right out of my head and send him on his way. We used to tap dance in sailor suits to
I,
that.
I love it.
Valley High, um, happy talk, happy talk. Talk about things you like to do. So, like I told you earlier, it was my mother's dream to be in the movies. People in the neighborhood called her Lena Horne. Uh, some of the really funny characters in our neighborhood would call her Zsa Zsa Gabor, and so it was really my mother's dream to be a movie star, and so she pushed me on the stage when I was about 8 years old. It was right up the street, a recreation center. And it was there that I really learned about music and dance and telling stories with the dance, because we had to act out the words to the song. The teacher wasn't a teacher where she said, you have to move this way. We would listen to the song and then figure out how we were going to move. So I learned it, I learned story through that. But to say the first time I got paid, that's when you know you're professional, right? When you get paid. The first time that happened wasn't until 1994. Okay, now I'm in my 50s, and I moved to a small town where I'm living at now in Coatesville. So it wasn't until I was introduced to Dunbar, and that's how I came become in the storytelling arena because of Dunbar, Paul Lawrence Dunbar poetry.
Ohio,
I was producing programs, huh?
Ohio poet.
Right, Ohio poet. I was producing programs. I was I had my little troupe of my daughter and my son was performing. I had a Girl Scout performance group. I was working behind the scenes as a creative director with children in the community for years. And then I did some radio programs, Caribbean Night radio show on the local. It used to come on your TV like your cable when
Sure.
cable used to be on the TV. And so I raised my children in this little small town called Coatesville. It's between Philadelphia and Lancaster.
Okay.
It's part of the Underground Railroad movement as well.
Mhm.
It's right not far from the Mason-Dixon line and not far from Cheney and Lincoln University.
Okay.
So I did a lot of story. I even hired a storyteller. I directed a big event in town for Martin Luther King Day in 1990, and I hired a lady to be a storyteller, and she was great, and the children all got, they all performed their shaka shaka, which was a dance against apartheid.
Oh,
And
yeah.
apartheid wasn't over in South Africa, and I had my little Girl Scouts dancing shaka shaka, which was a Trinidadian calypso
Wow.
that was popular against apartheid.
Wow.
You could still find it on YouTube. So the girls would dance and the boys would drum. The little boys would drum and the girls would come out dancing. So we toured around locally at, the old folk senior centers and stuff like that and libraries. But yeah, so the storytelling evolved, and I could say it wasn't until I met one of my Girl Scout girls, their father, Bob Jones, and he started up a dance troupe, and he wanted to have an interracial dance troupe because he had been turned away from the Kwanzaa program.
Mm.
We were doing Kwanzaa, and the brother who was the Kwanzaa brother, the elder,
Right.
he asked Bobby wanted to come and drum because he had been involved in movements in Philly and drum African drum ensembles in
Sure.
Philadelphia. So he wanted to drum for Kwanzaa, and they told him he couldn't because he had European female drummers.
Mm.
So they were saying this is Kwanzaa, we wanted to be all African American
Okay.
and that. So what Bobby did was he decided to start his own dance company, and it would be interracial. And so he started up the Coatesville Cultural Society, and the motto was arts, all races together.
Oh, I
So he taught me Dunbar. So he introduced me to Paul Lawrence Dunbar.
and that's powerful work. And what I love is in the story of becoming a storyteller, often I talk to a lot of tellers and they're like reading folk tales, and there's nothing wrong with that, and the fairy tales, but they only find the expression sometimes through just telling. You're finding music and dance and song and rhythm, and it mirrors, dare I say, the echoes of how you lived and how people brought you up, whether it's calypso or whatever the nature is. So sometimes we can be defining too limiting of the art that's called storytelling. So how would you define storytelling?
Oh, how would I define it?
Yeah.
I'm not an academic genius about it. For me, it's a
And nor do you
natural.
have to be.
Yeah, well, I don't. It's so many definitions of it, but the way I view it, like I was telling my husband earlier, the way I view it is that it's sort of in the griot tradition
Right.
of continuing the culture of oral tradition. So I look at it like I love history. I'm an armchair historian on not only my own culture, but the culture of Italians, Irish, German. I'm interested in the people's foods, how they speak, what they wear. Um, so I look at storytelling as just an oral art that only humans can do.
Right.
Only we can tell the
We
stories.
need to remember that. Only we can do that, or at least that
Only we
we
can, yeah.
recognize. But the storytelling, we often neglect the story making, the process of creating that story. How important is the story making process to your telling?
Well, I am. Uh, I didn't really think about making stories that much because of the Dunbar was already there before me.
Right,
I just had to interpret it.
right,
I just had to read it beyond the dialect. I had to understand it, and I had to draw on my culture. Not only my culture is growing up in Philadelphia, but I had to draw on my Southern influence of
right.
that trip I took to see my Aunt Pearl down in South, Ahoskie, North Carolina, catching tadpoles, being around country people, my family in Louisiana.
Sure.
So I had to listen to them and draw on that to do Dunbar. To say I want to write, I didn't get into writing stories, Kevin, until I started producing my podcasts. Other than that, I would just, what other stories I had? Well, I was just so immersed in Dunbar that
Right.
I really never
Well, he could take up a lifetime, couldn't he?
he has taken up my lifetime. And
And that's a
so
gift.
I did how yeah, so to I haven't gotten into writing until I did the podcast, to tell you the truth.
No worries. And often tellers think that they first have to come to a drawing table or a writing table. And I say that you just need to go out and tell sometimes, and that's part of the making process. That it's great. I'm a writer and I'm a director of a writing project, or have been.
Mhm.
But I often believe that word dance in the world before we write what we want down. We handcuff ourselves to the printed page if we don't dance in the world we're talking about, which is what you just said, to go back to Southern roots and, for me, Appalachia. And I want to dance with the people who I'm writing about and talking about. And I want to do the Calypso dance instead of just putting it on the paragraph. You know what I'm saying?
I get you. Yes, but it's not easy for everyone because I was just talking to another storyteller, and uh I told her, I said, it's not easy to do what we do.
Right, right,
And I can understand. And I could never, for that reason, it was difficult for me to be an actress because you have to keep redoing things over and over. I prefer theater.
right.
I'm really a theater. I love theater. The first play I was ever in, I was 14 years old, and it was on the story of Malcolm X.
Oh, wow.
My mother had a boutique. She had a store where she sold knit outfits for women and wigs. Before the Chinese came in with the cheap wigs, hers was human hair, and she had a hairdresser that styled them. So
Wow.
right next door to my mother's boutique on 52nd Street, which is called it's like the avenue for all African Americans, all 52nd Street in Philly. Everybody knows that's where all the black folks are. Okay,
Sure, sure.
so all the shops. So my mother had a shop there, and about two doors away was Hakeem's bookstore, and
Oh,
Hakeem had the first fully black bookstore in Philadelphia. And everybody, he's still there. His daughter's still running the
oh, wow.
store.
Excellent.
So, and behind the store, they had a little theater at the time. And I auditioned to be in the theater on the story of Malcolm X called El Haj Malik. So I like theater. And maybe that little bit of training I had, just flowed over into the storytelling that I end up, and I
Well,
and I told stories on radio. I've done radio on documentaries on radio. When I left, I moved out to California when I was about 19 years old, and I got involved in the music industry and in radio.
and what you said is, storytelling can be hard work. It's a discipline of practice and performance and play, all the P's. They say everybody can tell a story, but to really, really work it so it's more than telling. I mean, there's front porch telling, there's traditional telling. Again, it comes back to limiting how we define it. There's room for everybody at the table, but sometimes people take longer to learn how to eat. Right?
Yes, but I think you have to have a natural talent for it. I
Yes.
think you have to have a natural talent for it, and if you have it. Okay, it's not something you can really study that much. Some people have the gift of gab,
Right.
and that's a genre of storytelling too. Just sitting there talking.
Exactly.
I see storytellers. I'm like, they're just talking about themselves. You
And
know?
we only get better if we do it. You know,
Yes,
we may not
yes.
shine in the biggest light, but maybe we're not looking for the biggest light. Maybe we're looking to bring families together. Yeah.
Well, I think that's important too. And I think the first place you should start telling stories is to your family if they want to be bothered. But I didn't I didn't have that.
No,
It's like,
I hear you
yeah,
there.
yeah,
So,
I didn't have that.
Ani, well, how does play come into your work?
I don't do it if I don't play.
I gotta quote that. That'll be the debut slogan. But yes, and so expand on that. Tell
I
me
don't want
more.
I don't really want to do it. I mean, I have some tear jerking pieces, especially with Dunbar. There's a piece called When They Listed Colored Soldiers. And everybody cries. And Bob Jones, who I called my Svengali, he taught us because we studied with him. When my children were in school, we'd go up at 9 o'clock till 5, and well, till 3 for me because I had to go get my children and be home for them. But we actually studied Dunbar's works, and he told me I used to cry when I would do this piece when they listed colored soldiers, and he said, "Don't cry." He said, if you cry, the audience won't cry. But if you don't cry, the audience is going to cry.
Wow, smart teacher. Yeah.
And I said, you know what? This guy was brilliant. I mean, he used to shoe horses out in the country. He grew up shoeing horses with his father and his father's brothers way out in a place called Elverson. And his grandmother is a folk artist, Ida Jones. They have a historical marker on her on Route 82
I've heard
between
about
between Coatesville and Kennett Square. There's a marker to Ida Jones. She was a folk artist, not self-taught, and so that's where he comes from, the arts, with his mother, his grandmother, and his father, who recited Dunbar to him at night by an oil lamp. You know, so
it.
that's what he taught me, and that's the only time I really get serious. A lot of other things I do, I always want to have fun with them.
But
It's
at the same time, play can bring tears. We have a misnomer that we think play is only about laughter sometimes. And as you've already just said, playing with the way that Dunbar can be, get the greatest impact. You played to get there so that the tears would move. So not all play is about bringing the laughter. Would you agree with that or disagree or?
no, I think you misheard me because what I,
No worries.
I
I've misheard
like I was
before.
maybe I like what I was saying is maybe you can laugh at something that touches you that's serious. Maybe someone says something really serious and you can laugh. But I think there's certain pieces that warrant seriousness, okay? Warrant a little drama, okay?
Right.
I'm also in a drama group with a bunch of drama mamas in Westchester, okay? So
I,
we bring the drama, we bring African American literature alive. We've done so many we've done Nikki, Maya, Alice, we've done Gwendolyn. We've done so many literary greats from the African American community to life in our readers' theaters. So I've also been involved with them for about 30 years, Westchester Community Performers. So we have funny stuff, but
right.
we also have the serious things. Because there's not a lot, Langston Hughes said something about laughter. It can't come to me right now, but not without laughter. That's one of Langston Hughes's titles.
He
And
also wrote a poem called Suicide's Kiss, where I bend to the water to give it a kiss.
okay, so
And
right.
I'm
So
like,
and
whoa.
not only that, but just the whole culture he comes from. That's our culture. That's African American culture. That's our experience. And we've had to use laughter to keep from crying.
I agree with
So
you.
so I don't really get into laughter for laughter.
Right.
Um, the times I'm really silly is when I do Down on the Farm with Granny Goose for the little children. Then I can get silly. I can pull them in the story. I give them little parts to act out in the story.
Sure.
I pull them in. So it's laughter for me as an African American woman and knowing my history. It doesn't always come frivolous, like, oh, we're just going to laugh at this. It's not frivolous. Laughter is serious. And I think I bring it naturally when I work with children. And I make the adults laugh too, but it's a subtle laughter.
Right.
It's not always like a like a joke. But I have something for you that I'm going to make them laugh in this debut thing. I found some stories.
I love it. I love it.
I'm I'm gonna do some what do you call it? What are you doing with debut? This debut program you're having.
Yes.
I'm gonna really debut something special for you.
I love it, and that's what debut's all about. It's telling a story that's never been told in the public, and we get to be the first audience. And I can't wait to not only hear it but engage in story play with you with it, and just have fun. And as you just said, it can even be serious moments that you play with. And I think if if I heard you right, you said that all stories that you tell have intention, and you move to the meaning and intention of that. Whether it's laughter, as Granny Goose, I said
Mhm.
that right?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's Granny Goose, that Mother Goose cousin, baby.
oh, I've seen. I'm sure she has plenty of stories to tell. But then the moments of Paul Lawrence Dunbar, or the moments in your life, or the reverence you have for your mother, who some say look like Lena Horne. I love it. Those are
Well,
powerful stories.
yes, yes. Well, I don't purposely look for that. What I do, I have a little workshop too called Ubuntu.
Okay.
Storytelling 101. And if I can get someone who just wants to be a storyteller without having to that just has the personality, okay, number one. Number two, not afraid to stand in front of people. I look for those kind of folks to come and take my workshop, and I've had about 4 people who've taken it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I tell them in the workshop is the story is the star.
I like that.
You
Yeah.
find your story, and you have to really love it to want to tell it.
Right. Right.
Okay. Um, I like aha stories, at the end. I like stories that make you think. I like stories. I did a workshop called The Many Muses of Oni Lasana for New Jersey Storytelling Guild. I don't know if you know Catherine Widener and them,
I've heard the
but
name. I've heard the
okay.
name. Probably someone I
Oh,
need to know
well,
better.
right. Well, I did a couple of years ago, and they basically had me come out and do a segment from like 5 of my programs. I had to present at least a story from each program. So I went from the beginning, which was who was our beginning storyteller way back? Who was the first storyteller that everyone knows? Everyone tells his story, Kevin,
Anansi?
before him.
God?
Well, that's something we can debate whether Anansi was before who. Come on, every
God?
storyteller tells the stories.
Jehovah? Um,
Jehovah. It's funny you would say that. No, it's Aesop.
oh, yes, yes. Definitely. No, I,
Aesop.
I was told that he was torn from limb to limb for tax evasion. But that's another story, evidently.
Poor thing. Poor thing. 'Cause he didn't make a dime off of
No,
his
he
story.
didn't.
Okay. I don't think enslaved people got paid. Okay.
Right, right.
But what I did, I went from Aesop to Anansi. And there's I'm interested in finding out if anybody knows is watching, who do you think came first, Aesop or Anansi?
Great question. Great.
Right. That's a
Or
great.
someone like Iktomi or Brer Rabbit or many of the tricksters.
Now, wait, Brer Rabbit isn't until you move through the Middle Passage with
That's
Anansi
true.
in the heads of the Africans. Okay. And they came over from Ghana, from West Africa, in the minds of these
Right,
Africans who were skilled. They were skilled in carpentry, they were skilled in growing rice, and they were skilled in telling stories.
right, right.
And they traveled through the Middle Passage to the South. Okay. And then that's when you're going to find, can you imagine being in a land where you get stripped of your language? You
Right.
have to learn a new language all over again. And you're speaking it, but you're mimicking the people who are so-called owning you,
Right.
and you come up with Brer Rabbit. Okay. And I have such a surprise for you. You won't believe it. But anyway, I'm not going to tell you for debut because I want people to really be curious to see what I'm going to debut coming out of Dunbar, coming out of Nancy, coming out of Aesop. And then I go into story activism.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. I love it.
Story activism was a label that was given me when I did a story called One Plastic Bag. And it's an environmental story. I have a program called Mama Earth,
Hmm.
where I dressed up as Mama Earth with flowers on my head and my butterfly skirt. The children love it, okay? And I flitter around. I was asked to come to a conservatory not far from where I live to do outdoors in the woods. And oh, they loved it. So I dressed up with butterflies. You know, you have to. Another thing I like that storytelling has done for me is that even though if you're not an actor, you can take on a persona, you
Exactly.
know, and
Exactly.
you want to bring something to the children. That's how I look at it. You
So,
know, if it
Oni,
was
you've been in many venues and seen story in various ways, and I so appreciate it. So now I'm going to ask you, what is your personal challenge for the next direction in your storytelling?
the personal challenge is to do the story at debut.
Well, good. We're going to meet that.
What you think? What you
Yeah. Well, good. We've got the spot and the space for you. So, when is debut? And I'll help you if you don't remember.
huh? I don't know. I gotta look for it.
No worries. January
I think
30th,
January 30th.
that Sunday,
January 30th is
2
debut.
o'clock.
So that's my personal challenge right now. Because one thing about me that I know is I live in the moment. I live in the moment and I like to live in the moment fully, joyfully, happily, you know. So I was in one direction earlier. Oh, I was in one direction last week to bring your debut thing to happen because you really got me with it. You got me with it. You know what you
Good.
got me with? You know what you did, Kevin?
What did I do?
You asked me to do a story I never told. Do you know how hard that is?
I do. I do. And I also know how valuable and joyful it can be.
I'm saying this guy is crazy. He wants. Wait a minute. I have 39 stories. I have 39 stories on my podcast, and I cannot tell one of them.
No.
I have a repertoire of Dunbar over. I have over 50 Dunbar pieces in my head, and I can't tell none of them.
No. It's a gift to the
I got something for you though, brother. I got something for you.
I
Okay.
love it. And I cannot wait, Oni. I
I got
cannot
something
wait.
for you. Don't you worry. I got something for you.
And we could talk forever and we will talk more, but Oni, you now have oh wait, Paul Lawrence Dunbar. Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah, real quick. I can't go without talking about this.
Please do. It is a gift and
Okay.
everybody should attend.
The idea for this is called You Can Do Dunbar, add him to your repertoire. Now it's for storytellers to add to their repertoire, teaching artists to teach your students, Dunbar, how we're going to teach your wait a minute, how do I hold this thing? Oh, there you go.
And I'll put it up too.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, okay. It's going to be February 12th. It's virtual on Zoom, and it's produced by Story Crossroads and Artists
Oh,
Standing Strong Together. So if you go on Story Crossroads right now, storycrossroads.org, no, storycrossroads.org, all things story, you'll see a video of me talking about it. But why this is so important is because Dunbar also wrote poetry in Irish and German dialect. Okay, so he also wrote in Irish and in German. We're going to touch on those and get some people to read. And Dunbar I just saw on CNN that Dunbar is getting a gold coin, a commemorative gold coin. And there's more. Okay, Paul Lawrence Dunbar is getting a gold commemorative coin for his 150th centenarian celebration, which
wow.
is going on now in Dayton, Ohio. Okay, and it's going to last till next year, till 2023. But the activities are going on now in Dayton, and so being a Dunbarian, that's what we call the people who do Dunbar. I not only wanted our children to learn Dunbar, but his poetry that I do in Granny down on the farm with Granny Goose. I do the Brother Dunbar Performance and Poetry Workshop that's published in a book called Literacy Development in the Storytelling Classroom. So I'm going to feature a little bit of that in this workshop to also teach teachers and teaching artists how to present him to your students. Theater, got to have a little theater, and so I'm really excited about this. So thank you for asking. It's February 12th, this 2022.
And Dunbar was meant to be heard. This wonderful Ohio poet teaches a
Oh,
whole breath, and in the hands of Oni, I can't wait.
he's the father of the spoken word movement in America. He was the first man, uh, I can't say whether European or African American, but he was the first African American that got paid to present his poetry in public. And he was after maybe Phyllis Wheatley. She was enslaved, but he wasn't. And his poetry, the beauty of it, I call him the American Shakespeare. Okay, I even go right there because the beauty of his prose is that it's people, you can hear the voices talking, you can hear women speaking. He wrote in women's voices, he wrote in men's voices, Irish dialect, German dialect, and it's just beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful when you get past the trying to read it and just try to listen to it.
And we
And that's
wholeheartedly recommend Story Crossroads. Check out Story Crossroads and Assist. I told them today we breathe better because of Assist. And
yes.
hint, there's going to be an Assist combination coming up on debut soon. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Oni, who now has the last word.
Well, I just want to thank you for watching. I can't wait to see you at debut. I have a really nice surprise for everyone. It's sort of continuation of my Paul Lawrence Dunbar work. It has to do with folk tales. And I think it's real special, and I can't wait to try it out on you and introduce you to this folklorist that I'm going to present on debut. Listen to my podcast. I have a wonderful podcast. It's called Auntie Oni's Story Village. And also, it's wherever you get your podcast, you can find it. AUNTI with an I for international. Okay. And also, we have a once a month gathering on Zoom for families where we invite children to come on and share their stories. And that's the first Saturday of every month. It's called Story Village Live. And I hope you can come on and just share a story with us. Well, it's for the children, but we invite other storytellers to come on and share. It's sort of like a freestyle thing to bring out the children's creativity, uh, more enhanced it more than they have a chance to at school nowadays. So it's almost like a talent show for children on Story Village Live. So you can go to my website, onilasana.com. It's ONILASANA, and find out more. Listen to my podcast. If you're looking for stories, go to Auntie Oni's Story Village, and you'll find a lot of wonderful stories. And music, too, if you want to add music to your stories. And contact me, because if you want the music, I'll send you the music. I'll let you know where you can find the music that matches the story. And so keep telling. Just remember, the story is the star, but you're the one that has to let it shine.